Okay, so hi everyone, and thank you very much for joining. As usual, we're going to start with a brief talk from each of our speakers, followed by a discussion, and we'll record the talks, but not the discussion. Before we start, I just wanted to say something briefly about the topic, because I think that the title of our discussion today was maybe a bit less clear than it might have been. And the title is Disasters Within Disasters, Interacting Hazards on Multiple Timescales. And I was kind of reflecting on this earlier, and I thought that hazards might not really be the appropriate term here, since the situations we'll be discussing are often not really the result of the timescales of the hazards, but rather those on which disasters unfold. And so the key question for today is really the particular challenges posed by responding to or preparing for one disaster whilst another is ongoing, or how to reduce the risk from one hazard without exacerbating another. And if all that seems kind of a bit theoretical, then perhaps I thought it might be helpful to kind of mention briefly where this idea came from. Namely that I work on earthquakes, and I've been worrying for quite a while that many of the ways that we think of building, which like in the West or in the global North, as being seismically resilient, are mostly made from concrete, and that's really not a kind of sustainable long-term solution. So the kind of question I started with was, how can we build earthquake resistant buildings which don't exacerbate the climate crisis? Yeah, that's where I came from. And so maybe that makes it a little bit more clear the kind of nature of the things we're thinking about, though I hope our discussion will be more wide ranging. And yeah, from that perspective, our first speaker is very well placed to address it. Sebastian Kaminsky is an associate structural engineer at ARUP. He works on a wide variety of international engineering projects with a particular focus on bamboo as a construction material and the development of permanent low-cost housing in seismically active areas, which I hope he will tell us a bit about today. So Sebastian, over to you.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Great, thank you very much, Camilla. Thanks for the introduction. So I'm just going to share my screen. Hopefully this all works. Can you all see that? Great. Okay, so I'm going to very quickly talk through developing sustainable and resilient housing for developing countries. Apologies for the speed of this. I know we're limited by time. So I'm going to first talk about some key challenges and considerations when developing housing solutions in developing countries in general. Climate change, of course, this is very important right now, as we all know. Cement contributes around 8% towards the global CO2 emissions. So we really need to cut down our use of cement in construction as much as possible. At the same time, and apologies if this is, can you see this at the top? Is that blocking the view? Or is it only on my screen? Okay, no, sorry, it's only on my screen. I can see the top's being blocked, sorry. The second point is the magnitude of inadequate housing combined with natural disasters. So currently around 1 billion people live in inadequate housing worldwide. That's a significant number, of course. When I say inadequate housing, that's housing which is unsafe, it's in a vulnerable location, it's not resilient enough, or simply it's not adequate for people's use in terms of hygiene and space. At the same time, earthquakes are the primary source of deaths in natural disasters worldwide, resulting in, on average, 60,000 deaths per year globally. So clearly, we do need resilient housing. Now, is this vulnerability a new thing? Just to explore this a bit more. So a lot of this vulnerability is new, I would argue. Traditional community resilience is actually very good, where disastrous events are frequent and materials are familiar. And local communities generally have an excellent understanding of their own resilience and how to use familiar materials properly. On the left-hand side, there's an example from Nepal, and the right-hand side from El Salvador. These are traditional systems which actually have some seismic resilience. They're not perfect, they're not up to modern codes, but they're not bad actually when they're in good condition and when they're well built. So communities through over thousands of years, through trial and error, have developed systems which are surprisingly resilient. However, where events are infrequent or other effects have disrupted a community, then you start to see disasters. Haiti, for example, they hadn't had an earthquake for over 200 years. So their memory of earthquakes wasn't there. So that's one of the reasons amongst many why Haiti was very vulnerable. You can also see this where new materials or technologies are brought in. On the left-hand side is an example from Ecuador. This is traditional bamboo housing. They've elevated the structure above ground. They know that this is a flood-prone area, so they protect against flooding, which happens every year. The more rarer earthquakes, they're less concerned about, but they still have quite a light structure. With new materials being brought in, such as masonry or concrete, you can see that they follow the same design. So that structure has quite a lot of resilience against flooding, but it's now much more vulnerable in an earthquake, much more unsafe. So that's the introduction of new materials and actually making them more vulnerable. Another consideration in post-disaster reconstruction, longer-term development is keeping up with the Joneses. People tend to naturally aspire to have what they perceive to be a better and more durable form of house, and one that reflects a higher level of prosperity in comparison with their neighbors. Who wants to live in a bamboo house, even if it's fully code compliant, if their next door neighbor lives in a masonry house? They're naturally going to want to live in that other house. There's a desire amongst I think all of us, because we're taught as engineers, architects, and construction professionals to reinvent the wheel when it comes to post-disaster reconstruction and longer-term development. And we see all these examples post-disaster: plastic bottle housing, adobe housing, earth ships, container houses. All of these are completely inappropriate, and they can actually be very unsafe for housing reconstruction. That's not what people want. People can't adapt that, but these are alien technologies and materials. So very quickly, I'm going to give you a case study that we've been working on for the past 10 years, where we've been developing a seismically resilient and sustainable housing system for El Salvador. So El Salvador, it's a small country around the size of Wales, very densely populated, very highly seismic, and a very aggressive climate in terms of it's warm and tropical. So natural materials don't fare very well there. We were given a brief by a local NGO who we've been working closely with to develop appropriate housing. Now, I'm not going to go through all of these, but these are all the different things that we needed to consider. A lot of things to have truly appropriate housing. It can't just be seismically resilient. It can't just be sustainable. It's got to tick all of these. And it's possible to do that, but that's a lot of work. So how did we do that? We first reviewed the existing construction systems, and they've got reinforced blockwork, confined masonry, adobe, and that's when we discovered one of the traditional vernacular systems called bajareke, which is a derivative of similar to our wattle and daub, and most countries around the world have had this sort of wattle and daub system. And this can be surprisingly seismically resilient when it's in good condition. So we thought, why don't we take that and improve it? So it's a vernacular improved system. And this sort of thing's been done quite a lot around the world, taking that vernacular and making it better with modern engineering, but keeping that traditional knowledge. We've used an owner-driven approach involving the community at all stages of the construction, focus groups, workshops, interviews, and the design. And that's resulted in this improved bajareke system. So the bajareke is basically a timber frame or bamboo frame clad in a matrix of bamboo or timber, finely plastered with mud, with a tiled roof and a stone upstand. We've engineered that by treating the timber and bamboo to protect against insects, engineering those connections to make them resilient against loads, replacing the mud mortar with a cement-based mortar, much thinner, replacing replacing the heavy roof with a lightweight cement fireboard roof, and raising the structure on a reinforced blockwork upstand. This is the completed design. On the left-hand side, that's before mortaring. On the right-hand side, after mortaring. You can see it looks just like any sort of modern form of house. It was very well received by the local community, so much so that they actually wanted that house instead of reinforced blockwork, which is the next best thing, really. In terms of external knowledge sharing, a lot of people are now building with this kind of system around the world. This improved vernacular system. We've codified it now. It's in the new ISO 22156, which is the latest bamboo structure design code to be published. And there's various guides for how to build with it. So just very quickly, some key messages for developing sustainable and resilient housing in developing countries. Number one, always use teams with wide-ranging skill sets. The best projects combine engineers with architects and sociologists to understand and respect people's views. It's essential to use that community knowledge. Communities have a significant amount of relevant expertise. These are two of my favorite photos where you can see a community on the left-hand side in rural India. Potentially they've had no formal education, but they know exactly how to build a resilient house. They've got lots of good details there. They've elevated their structure, they've protected their structure. There's a bamboo structure in there. They've protected it fully against rain by plastering it fully with mud, a good overhang, good details for durability and resilience that unfortunately we're forgetting right now. Beware common myths and misconceptions, especially regarding natural and sustainable materials. We see this a lot regarding durability, seismic resistance, and sustainability. Materials such as bamboo and timber, they're not automatically seismically resilient. It's very possible to make dangerous housing using those materials. And in terms of sustainability, one has to source them from sustainable sources. Just because you're using bamboo doesn't mean it's automatically sustainable. You could be contributing to deforestation or cutting down bamboo, which is actually helping resist landslides. Avoid bringing alien technologies and materials. These are invariably failures and can be actually quite disastrous. Don't force the use of natural materials where they're not accepted or where they're not appropriate. Sometimes they can be used. Sometimes we have to revert to other potentially higher carbon alternatives because they're more appropriate in general. It's not ideal, but at the moment, sometimes there are no alternatives. Consider working with and improving traditional vernacular technologies. There's a lot we can learn from these. There isn't one size fits all housing solution worldwide. Context drives the solution. Sometimes we need to give cash, sometimes we need to give a one type of design, and sometimes we need to give another. And just to finish off, that there's many different things to consider when developing truly resilient infrastructure. Failure to consider these properly can lead to their own significant issues, and in some cases, their own disasters. Thank you very much. Thanks to all those involved in the project and some further reading on bamboo and affordable housing.
That was brilliant. Thank you very much, Sebastian. Oh, I think you've maybe frozen. Okay. No, that was great. Okay, thank you very much. That was brilliant. Yeah, so next we're going to hear from a very different perspective from Dr. Riam Knapp, who is a postdoctoral researcher in the Department of Social Anthropology here at the University of Cambridge. She's interested in how humans interact with nature, with a particular focus on non-Western perspectives and the relationships between religion, spirituality, and environmental conservation. And she's currently working on the project Himalayan Connections, Melting Glaciers, Sacred Landscapes, and Mobile Technologies, which I think she's going to tell us a bit about today, if that's all right. Go ahead, Riam.
All right, hi, thanks. Let me share my screen. Set up?
Not yet.
How's that? No, okay, sorry, because I lose you. Screen sharing has failed. All right, let me try again. It's saying try again later. Sorry, let me just have a. But first, let me thank you for having me here then while I'm trying to work on this. Okay, share screen. Okay.
If it doesn't work, you can. Oh, perfect. There we go. We've got you.
Okay,
yeah.
Great. So I'm also going to, well, first thank you, Camilla, and thank you to the rest of the organizing committee and everyone here. It's really nice to be here, though I was initially definitely discombobulated by what would I say to a disaster research seminar. So I think I'll just introduce our project and then hopefully questions and commonalities will come up. Sebastian, I really appreciated your presentation. I thought it was fantastic, and it spoke a lot to the things that we see and experience, you know, both in work and at home, perhaps in other places that aren't where I'm based right now, which is in Cambridge. So just quickly, ours is an interdisciplinary project and it's place-based. So on the core project team, we have, so I was, my PhD was in the Department of Geography, even though now I'm sitting in the Mongolian Inner Asia Studies unit in social anthropology. We work with also some of the members are textual studies scholars, mostly religious studies, Buddhist studies. Bhaskar Vera, who's in the Department of Geography, is a political economist. Dr. Hildegard Dienberger is an anthropologist and textual studies. The project lead and manager at the University of Oslo is religious studies, and the other postdoc, Dr. Astrid Hoften, is in Tromsø at the University of the Arctic, and she's religious studies. Anyway, I'll just quickly move on. So basically, the way the project started and was conceptualized is through our two long-term field sites. And the main one, initially as conceived, being in a so-called remote place in far western Nepal, in Humla. The other site, which is sort of more my area, is in Bhutan. Both have had recurrent glacial lake outburst floods, GLOFs, but also both are communities that have existed for hundreds and hundreds of years. And especially in the case of the community of Limi, it's actually 3 villages in a valley in Nepal. They've got a over 900-year-old temple. So this also speaks to issues of heritage. And what's been happening is that, say, over a decade, with the repetition of GLOFs, the undercut of the riverbank is getting closer and closer to the temple. So there is this real dilemma of, what should they do? Do they stay or do they go? Now, my colleague is hopefully having a book coming out on this project and specific to this community in the coming year. So she's far better suited to speak about these things. What I've put below here, you'll see, is some pictures from an article that was actually led by another colleague who is a physical geographer and a spatial scientist on the glacial lake. But you'll see what the article focuses on, which I thought was very interesting, is outburst flood threatening the oldest Buddhist monastery in northwestern Nepal. So even in Natural Hazards and Earth System Sciences publication, it's the human story and what we would hope would be the kind of place-based, very contextualized perspectives that really matter also. So I won't go through these, that's sort of the background and the research questions, but main methods that we've been using are text-based. I'll say a little more in a bit about what kind of texts we go through, participant observation, in-depth interviews, but this also very much relies on long-term knowledge and working with people in these communities. So Dr. Astrid, who's the one in Nepal, we both have about 10 years of at least familiarity with the two places where we work. And just move on quickly. So one of the things we're interested in is how do different knowledges meet up, or how does knowledge travel, right? Questions of epistemology, ontology, but then also as regards policy making, environmental perception and decision making. Whose knowledge counts, when, where, why, and how. Here on the left, you've got a picture of us doing fieldwork in 2018. That's at the monastery in Humla. And then about a year later, we had a conference co-hosted and organized by our national partners, the International Center for Integrated Mountain Development, which is ICIMOD. So, there, and also we were supported by a GCRF networking grant to get community members, as well as regional government, as well as national government together. And the aim of the thing was that the stories and sort of the needs, ideally, we were trying to work with, the theory of change generated from the community first, so that was in itself an interesting experiment. And I think about a year later, there is a publication that ICIMOD have brought out on that. Okay, so. Now I'm moving to Bhutan, and I'm just showing you a very sort of old picture published in 1994. This is the other sort of site we're looking at. So this monument on the left, it's a 17th century zone, which is a fortress monastery, very extremely historically significant. It's sort of the foundational to nationhood and ideas of nationhood in Bhutan. And it's on a peninsula, which was, So the peninsula was identified by the founding sort of father of modern Bhutan, in accordance to basically landscape geomancy. That was, at least that's in the histories and the stories of how the location was selected for the build. Anyway, what you see here is what happened when there was a glacial lake outburst flood upstream, and a lot of damage occurred. As you see, the white in the picture is sand. So that was not terribly long ago. So what we were able to do, of course, is to talk to people who remember it, remember what they thought, what they did, what the explanations around this were, as well as talking to government and organizations about early warning systems and things that are in place, and seeing again how different perceptions and decisions are integrated or work together, or sometimes don't work together. So I just wanted to quickly introduce the Bhutan team. So what you have here is our national partners is the College of Language and Culture Studies. So for them, the fact that they're working on a climate change or perceptions of climate change project is quite new as well. So there's been a lot of learning going on there. My three colleagues and field research associates are at the bottom here. So more on that later. So quickly, what I wanted to highlight was, say, Dr. Karma Punso, who is with the Loden Foundation, is the historian and a researcher who has also worked with seismologists, for example. So here's where something like in-depth textual knowledge comes in handy, where you have a database and you can be looking at texts from the 7th century, for example, and he was actually able to identify information that filled a seismic gap, right, in other ways of collecting data and getting records. Okay, oops, so sorry, I'm gonna quickly, where am I here? Okay, so about 3 months into Bhutan, COVID happened with lockdown and things. So I could no longer go, out to villages or to do field work. That just, it wasn't, there was no lockdown, but it wouldn't have worked in terms of I think good research or sensitivity or anything like that. So what I wanted to show you was on the way home, through one of driving westward in the country, we came upon this. This is the main east-west highway, or part of it. So I'm just going to quickly show you that. So what you have here is a ritual that we've been looking at in terms of weather. It's a weather ritual, and usually it's used to bring rain. But what you had now with the advent of COVID is it's kind of been repurposed. So here it's being conducted in order to bless and protect the community from virus transmission. And as you see, on the left, you have the community members out. The older lady was prostrating, and what she was prostrating to are actually the texts that are being carried on the backs of the monks. You can see them strapped on there. So the text is the representative of the Buddha Dharma, which gives blessings and protection. So this was really interesting to me, in the sense that what we'd always thought of as a rain ritual was now being deployed, but also by different levels of government and in a very different ways to ward off COVID. So I did go on and have just written a paper with one of my colleagues that you saw earlier on this redeployment of ritual at a time of COVID, and sort of what resources it draws on, but also what changes in the use and adaptation, say. And I should also say that, so Bhutan has done thus far fantastically well in keeping COVID at bay. They were from the start, the sort of the leadership and the things put in place. So His Majesty the King has been at the front line, kind of going to the borders, going into quarantine afterwards. The Prime Minister is a doctor. The Minister of Health is a doctor. but they're using different strategies as well, right? But so the discourse in the country right now, and I'm quoting from a paper that came out 2 days ago, is the Kingdom of Bhutan is literally the last country in South Asia still standing. Let us remain a beacon of hope for the region and the world. This is actually the UN UNICEF Bhutan rep saying this, but also this is very much kind of a discourse you hear often from everyone. And the picture I'm going to leave you with here is a vaccine blessing. So India sent Bhutan Covishield vaccines for their first jabs, and then they did a fantastic job of getting the majority of the population that needed to be vaccinated. But here at the airport, you have the monk body doing a purification blessing on the vaccines as well. And I won't go into it here, but there's many reasons for that too. It's not just performative. It has to do with in certain ways, giving the all clear in different registers of signals to different people. I'll just stop there and we can talk more about that later if anyone's interested. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much. That was brilliant. Yeah, a super interesting and different perspective on this. Okay, and so finally, we'll come to Dr. Theresa Amigos, who is a lecturer in natural resources and international development at the University of East Anglia. She works on interdisciplinary approaches to disaster risk and vulnerability, particularly in Latin America. And she's interested in the relationship between humans and the environment from the perspective of environmental justice, citizenship, and human rights. She also uses participatory art as a methodology, and I'm not sure if she's going to have time to speak about that in her introduction. So please do ask her about it afterwards if she doesn't have time to do that. Yeah, Teresa, please.
Thank you, Camilla, and thank you, Sebastian and Riam. Very interesting and so good to share this space with you. Can you see my screen now? Yeah. Okay. Let's make it into the presentation. Good. Okay. So today I am going to try to somehow answer, or more provoke some ideas for a conversation around these interactions between hazards at different time scales. You're right that when I was thinking about this, they are not really hazards, they are different things, but that's why I put them in inverted commas. So we think about them as hazards because they are different ways in which people are being affected. And in that sense, they are hazards, they are hurting people. So, and I'm going to share stories specifically from 2 projects that I've been working in about how where different hazards or different issues interact and affect and impact people, but really following a little bit what Riam was saying around the importance of different types of knowledges and the importance of listening to those who experience those hazards, in inverted commas, hazards, and why is it important for disaster risk management and future preparedness to listen to those who are being exposed and experiencing these different events. Okay, so let's see. The first story is from Tungurao volcano in Ecuador. I am from Ecuador, not from Tungurao, but yes, from a place where there are volcanoes. And here, the volcano was erupting from 1999 until around 2018. It produced a lot of ash, pyroclastic flows, lahars, and it interrupted people's livelihoods, and also there were people got killed by pyroclastic flows in 2006. In addition to that, and especially at the beginning of the eruption in 1999, there was a really bad economic and political crisis in Ecuador. That was not only in Ecuador, it was throughout Latin America, for those who know about it, and it was bad in Argentina, in Brazil, in other countries. And what happened in Ecuador is that it ended up resulting in the dollarization of the economy. What this means is that the currency that we used to have in Ecuador was called sucres, stopped being used, and we moved to use US dollars. Okay, I'm not going to go into the details of that, but this had a big impact on people. And on top of that, and for the people living in Tungurao, they came at the same time. They interacted. Two hazards or two events interacted at the same time, causing a lot of damage and impact. And what I want to do here, and what I'm gonna to portray these stories, I'm bringing in the voices from the people that I work with. Because it is from them that we have to hear. No, I'm just a storyteller here. They are the ones that know best all of this. So Victor from Manzano, when talking about what happened to them, he says, I left and sold my cows at 800, 600, 500,000 sucres each. They were good cows with calves and they were producing milk. I used to live out of that before 1999. A few months later, when we started using dollars, the 10 million sucres that I went to exchange became $400. With that money, I went to buy a cow, but they would cost $800, $1,000, $100, $2,000 each. This is when, how can I put it, I was left in the street. The volcano hit us on the one side, but dollarization on the other. What happens to people when they have to deal with all of that? How do they experience all of that? I think this is precisely one of the stories that I wanted to bring and us to think about. Josefina from Chacauco, while recognizing that, she told me, even if the volcano gives us a lot of work and affects us a lot, our source of pride is the work we put into our land. How are we going to abandon this land if it is what maintains us? This speaks to people's attachment to place, but generally to some of what Riam was saying before, the importance of being in a place and how we all relate to different landscapes and environment in different ways, and how much and how important it is to consider that when thinking about preparing for different things. So in summary, Tungurao's story or period of activity frames the story of change, but tracking the associated changes in society reveals a process that is neither linear in terms of causation, nor uniform in terms of its social effects. This is one of the findings from our project. We still work there. We've been working there since 2014. We have a very good relationship with the people there. And we've been trying to understand how knowledge changes over time as people are exposed to the volcano, but equally as the political and social landscapes change, and what it means to live in this area. So if you want to learn more about this, you can visit the Striva project page. And I think some of you maybe have heard about this project before. So the other story and the other voices that I wanted to bring to the discussion are from Colombia. In Colombia, we worked with people who had been displaced by the conflict and resettled in areas at risk of disaster from a natural hazard. Colombia is a country that unfortunately brings together these two issues in a really strong way. So on the one hand, it's one of the countries with the highest percentage of internally displaced people, and they amount to about 8 million, okay? And at the same time, Colombia is a country that is highly exposed to natural events. This includes landslides, flooding, earthquakes, storms, hurricanes, you name it, and of course, volcanoes. And so what we wanted to do in this project is we wanted to understand the trajectories of risk and really try to work carefully with people in understanding what it means for them to move from one place to another under these circumstances. The Colombian people that we work with had ended up resettling in places where they would be at heightened risk from hazards, often with the knowledge of that fact. And the reasons why they settle in those places are going to become clear as I bring their voices into the conversation. As I was saying before, they were exposed to landslides, flooding, and tropical storms, and we worked in 4 settlements in different parts of Colombia. Yeah. Again, if you want to know more about the details of this, we just published a paper. These photos are from some of those settlements. So this is Bogota on the left, and then the others are in near Pereira. As you can see, I would imagine Sebastian would say that these are vulnerable buildings, and yeah, they are very difficult places to live in, and on top of that, they are exposed to flooding and subsidence in the case of Bogota. Okay, so what does it mean to experience these interacting hazards? And Nelly from Caimalito says, it was difficult to cope with rivers and storms, but the real suffering for us was the war. Carmen from Casuca near Bogota tells that I arrived in Bogota with all that I'd worked for, and I bought these 2 really cheap plots of land. I didn't know you weren't allowed to buy this land, and I bought these 2 plots of land and the house. And finally, Laura from Manizales says that, and that's what I did. Look, I put together just 1 room, and bit by bit, I built it up slowly. And look how I've got it now, just with reed mats for walls. But me and my children are proud of it because we stopped wandering. And this is really, really an important point from the work we've been doing in most countries, but very strong in Colombia, the importance of the home. Sebastian brought this up in his presentation as well, the importance of not the house, but a home, a place where you live with your family or with those who are close to you. And it's become very clear for us the importance of the home during COVID. So we also know what it means very clearly, and we are there. And how for people who have been displaced by violence, having a shack, even in a place that was at risk, became so important. As researchers or people working in disaster risk, we need to consider this. We cannot just see the risk of being exposed to flooding without being the importance of that home in the context of course, a different time scale and a different hazard in inverted commas, which is the conflict and displacement. So just for us to think, these are points that I wanted to make to finish the presentation. How can research contribute towards preparing for these interacting events? In the social sciences and in my work, we've used the concept of vulnerability. It helps us understand how and why people are exposed to hazards and affected by hazards, and what we call the root causes of risk. It helps us understand the root causes of risk. However, there has been a critique, and I'm very much part of that critique, that the concept of vulnerability is constructing people's identities as vulnerable, and emphasizes the need to understand, and we need to understand people's relations to risk through their own eyes and voices. But most importantly, we also need to see people's capacities or abilities to respond to these different interacting events. So the question becomes, who defines vulnerability? Who defines safety? Who defines that house is safety? Sebastian as the engineer, me as the social scientist, or Riam as the anthropologist, or the people that are living there? And what are people's capacities in relation to this question and to their experiences? So my work, what we are trying to do with lots of other colleagues, is to focus on knowledge and listening to those voices, listening to the voices of those who experience these events, and opening genuine spaces of knowledge co-production between different disciplines and different people, like Sebastian was suggesting as well. And what seems what is happening in Riam's work. How I do this, and I won't get into this in particular, but I'm happy to respond to questions. I try to work around this issue of opening genuine spaces of knowledge co-production through the use of arts-based participatory methodologies towards disaster risk reduction. Why, and how do I do it? It's based on the idea that we need to recognize people's capacities to respond to risk. And I think I'm gonna end that with one of those, the murals from one of those events. This is Volcán Tungurao, And this is how people see the volcano in their everyday lives. So yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you, that was brilliant. Right, I'm just going to stop the recording.